Okay, now let's start it. The liquidity preference model, an aggregate demand curve. In particular, we are interested in why the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping curve. So liquidity preference model is developed by John Keynes. And keep in mind, this model studies the money market and interest rate. So we will show the graph here. We put the interest rate I on the vertical axis and the real money balance which represented by M divided by P on the horizontal axis. So what does the real money supply curve look like? And if you can record, normally we use a big M to represent the money supply, and we just add some notation. The little s here means supply of the money. And the money is nominal variables. We make some adjustment here. We use the money M divided by the average price level P. Because we use the price to make adjustment, the MP divided by P here represent the real money supply. So that's the reason we put again the S here as a notation to stand for the supply of the money. So money, nominal money M, adjusted by the price level P, that's a real money supply. But who determines the real money supply? Who determines the amount of the money in the circulation? I think many of you still can record. That's the central bank. That's the Federal Reserve. So the Fed is the player behind the supply of the money. And we have an assumption here is the Fed make decision of the money supply independent of the interest rate. So this implies the interest rate will not affect the real money supply, and the Fed decision has nothing to do with the interest rate. It's independent. So the supply of the money in the real balance term will be vertical. And let's move on to the money demand. Money demand means what? Means the amount of the money the public want to hold. What's the main reason people want to hold money? If you can recall what we learned, the three basic functions of the money, the most important, the reason people want to hold money is for the transaction purpose. In other words, the money works as a media of exchange. And the people use the money to pay for the goods and the service. So again, we have an assumption here. Say they are owning two assets. People can hold. One is what we call the money. When you hold the money in your checking account, normally you will not earn interest. That's another type of asset people can buy is a bonds. And we know if the people invest into the bonds, the bond will pay interest. So here comes the question. If the interest rate increase, I increase, the money demand is going up or going down? Back to our assumption here. The people only can hold two different types of assets, money and the bonds. If the interest rate increase, you can imagine people will buy more bonds because it means the people can earn more interest. So on the same time, because people put more money into the bonds market, people will hold less money on hand. Right? And we know the holding money means the money demand. If the people hold less money on hand, means the demand for the money will go down. And here you can see the relationship between the interest rate and the money demand is negative. So which means the money demand curve will be downward sloping curve. So now we want to see the one application here. If the money supply, or if we can say the price level P increases, what happened to the interest rate? When we say the interest rate, we mean the equilibrium interest rate, I0 here. So if a price reduce, how could this happen to the interest rate? Is interest rate going up or down? So we need to use this model we just learned to find out the answer. For the liquidity preference model we started, and we can see the price P actually appeared on the supply side because real money supply P work as a divisor. So if the price level increase, means the denominator become larger, what happened to the whole real money supply? So we use the same amount of the nominal money divided by the larger value of the price, and we can imagine supply of the money, the whole real money supply will go down. So if the money supply goes down, so money supply curve will shift to the left, so which means equilibrium interest rate will go up. So now we get a conclusion here. Using the liquidity preference model, when the price goes up, it will push up the interest rate. Yet at the same time, you can imagine if the price down, interest rate will go down. Now we need to relate this to the aggregate demand. Be very careful. The model here we show is a money market, but the aggregate demand curve is the goods and the services market. So the horizontal axis here is aggregate output. Let's use a big white. So it's different from the money market. The variable on the vertical axis is also different. It's average price level. So what does the aggregate demand curve look like? Is upward sloping or downward sloping? With help from liquidity preference model, we actually can find out the answer. And we know if the price goes up, based on the liquidity preference model shown above, we know the equilibrium interest rate is up. Could this increase in the equilibrium interest rate affect aggregate demand? And recall, every time when we try to analyze aggregate demand, we need to record the total expenditure or aggregate expenditure. It has 4 components: consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. So when the interest rate increase, what happened to the consumption? Because of the cost of the borrowing money goes up, people will get less loan, spend less money on the big item like houses and a car, so consumption goes down. Similarly, firms will borrow less money because of the increase in the cost of the borrowing money. So the investment goes down as well for business. And both of these will cause the aggregate demand to down. So it means the demand for the goods and the services from the whole society goes down. Now what do we get? We can clearly see if the price increase, the aggregate demand will go down. So which means the price and the aggregate demand, these two variables has a negative relationship. If negative relationship, we know the aggregate demand curve would look like this, the downward sloping curve. So when we try to derive the aggregate demand curve, we base this model on the liquidity preference model. And then we can find out the price, average price increase because aggregate demand decrease. The goods and the service produced by the whole society will go down. Or we can see if the price dropped, the goods and the service produced by the whole society will increase. And this is from the aggregate demand side, not from aggregate supply side. Please keep in mind. So on the aggregate demand side, average price level and the average and the aggregate output, they have negative relationship.